I don't have enough space. Whew. Ah! It's okay. Hi guys, Happy New Year! Happy New Year! I know this is not gonna be my first video of the year because I didn't plan with a lot, but we're gonna pretend like it is. So Happy New Year, guys! I hope everyone is doing well. I hope that 2024 will be a better year than 2023. That is what I hope. But even though 2023 was not the best year overall, in terms of my reading year, it was actually the best reading year I've ever had. Surprisingly enough. This is the first year that I managed to read 100 books a year. I never managed to do that ever in my life, so I'm really happy about that. And also just in terms of quality, also I had a pretty good reading year. I had a lot of favorites. I wanted to start the video by talking actually about my honorable mentions, because I had two books where they're technically favorites. Well, okay. Let me explain. Basically, they are favorite books of mine, but I didn't read them for the first time this year. They are rereads, but they are favorites. And since I only got this channel this year, I never talked about them. So I felt like, you know, it was appropriate for me to talk about them, even though I didn't read them for the first time this year. And also it's my channel, so I do what I want. So I wanted to talk to you about them a little bit. And so the first book that I wanted to talk to you about, that was a reread and very much a favorite, is The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. Honestly, the whole Raven Boys cycle, I love these books so much. I read these books years ago when I was, 19? Something like that. I was definitely in college. And I feel like these books are the best example for the found family trope. If you like this trope, you need to read this series, because this is where it's at. It's such a good found family trope. The characters are also charming and just so lovely. You love their relationships, you love them all. The atmosphere is so great, the writing, I just love these books so much. I picked The Dream Thieves because technically it's the only 5 stars in the series. I prefer The Dream Thieves a little bit, so this is the one I picked. It's the one about Ronan, who is my favorite character in the series, and upon my reread, he's still my favorite character in the series, and this is still my favorite book. I love these people so much. These people, they're not real people, but to me they are real. I love these characters so much. I didn't even tell you what the book is about. I just realized. Well, at this point, if you don't know what the Raven cycle is about, like, you need to read them. You just need to read them. You don't even need to know what they're about. Just know that there's a Welsh king, they're a group of young teenagers who become a found family and who are all so lovely and attaching, and it's great. It's great. That's all you need to know. Read this book. My next reread, that's an honorable mention, an honorable favorite, is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This was my favorite book for a long time, actually. This is the book that got me back into reading fantasy, because pretty much before this book, the only fantasy that I'd ever read was Harry Potter. No comment. And I mean, I really liked Harry Potter at the time, but for some reason I never read any fantasy after that. And then I found BookTube, and I found Six of Crows, and I read it, and I loved it. I loved it so much. Again, similarly to the Raven cycle, I mostly... Hi! Yes, similarly to the Raven cycle, it's mostly about the characters and the found family aspect of it that I really loved. It's also a high story, but you probably know about it. I reread this book this year because of the adaptation. The second season of the Netflix adaptation came out this year, and so I reread the book because of it. I have mixed feelings about the Netflix adaptation, but whatever, we're not here to talk about that. But it had been years since I read this book, and even though I still considered it one of my favorites, because I never reread it all these years, I wasn't sure. And honestly, it's mostly because I was scared to reread it, because it was such an important book for me back then, and I loved it so much, and I was so scared that after having read many more books, I would reread this and find it lacking, that I honestly never reread it. But I'm so happy to say that no, it's good. It's still good. I still love it. I reread it and it was just like the first time. Even honestly, I think it was even better. And there were also so many things that I forgot. For example, I forgot how funny this book is and how fun. Like the banter between all of the characters. I remember really loving all the relationships, but I really forgot how funny all of these characters were and their interactions were. And yes, I'm so happy I reread it and I love it just as much as the first time. I love it. I love it so much. I do not want to talk about Shadow and Bone though. Like the Grisha trilogy, I pretend it does not exist. The first official favorite on this list is gonna be Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. My main reason for reading books and loving reading books is to see things from a different perspective and to read from different characters. That is why I like to read many different genres. And so that's kind of the main reason why I read this book, because it was about a subject matter that I didn't really know anything about, detransitioning, because I knew about it because I had heard some things about it, but I never really thought about it like much deeper. So I kind of always assumed that detransitioning was basically for people who thought they were trans, and so they started transitioning, and then upon that they realized that actually they weren't, and so they detransitioned. I never really considered what other reason people would have for detransitioning and what the experience would be. And so this book was really enlightening in that way. So in this book we follow mainly two characters, Ames and Reese, who used to be in a relationship, but Ames detransitioned, and that was kind of the breaking point for their relationship. Reese did not take it well at all, and so we see them much later, years later, and so Ames is now a man because he used to be a trans woman and then he detransitioned and now he's a man, and he's in a relationship with his boss named Karina, which is a great idea, you know, always a great idea to date your boss. She gets pregnant, and Ames, who really wants to reconnect with Reese, starts remembering that Reese's whole time dream was to become a mother. He thinks the greatest idea of all time, which is to ask Reese if she wants to co-parent that baby with him and his current girlfriend Karina, without actually telling Karina first that he's gonna ask his ex to co-parent their baby. So that's a great idea. I don't see how that could go wrong, actually. So he does that. As you can imagine, it doesn't really go over well, and basically the whole story is about we follow two narratives. So we follow two perspectives. We follow Ames and Reese perspectives, and we also follow two timelines. So when they were together and they were both trans women, and now years later when Ames detransitioned and became a man, and Reese, who is still a trans woman but has a very different experience than Ames. I loved being from these two characters, but I have to say I much preferred Ames' perspective because of the fact that he's the transitioner, and this is the thing that kind of interested me the most about this book, because like I said, I knew nothing about it, and I thought his perspective was so interesting, something that I never considered, to have the perspective of someone who... Because the thing about Ames is that it's not that he's not a trans woman. He explains that being perceived as a trans woman, the knowledge that he would always be perceived as a trans woman and not a cis woman, was what made him detransition, because he felt like it was just easier to live his life as a cis man than a trans woman. And I just thought, I don't know, I thought it was so interesting, his whole perspective on life and his whole story. And Reese was also very interesting. Her whole experience with femininity as a trans woman was also very interesting to see, because obviously as a cis woman, I have a completely different experience of it. And to see someone who was not raised to be a woman, who was not socialized from basically their whole life to be a woman, to see how they grapple with their idea of femininity and how their struggles with feeling feminine. For example, Reese does this thing where she gets into a lot of abusive relationship with men because she feels like men being violent with her somehow enforces her own femininity for her. And I thought that whole aspect very intriguing. I thought it was very interesting. I try not to be judgmental because, like I said, because I'm not a trans woman, I'm not gonna necessarily understand all of the perspectives that they have and all of their experiences. So again, I was trying to understand, and it was very enlightening. I felt like it was very complete in the sense that you really get deep into both of these characters' mind and their experiences. I think the author did a great job doing that, making you understand their point of view, even if you don't necessarily always agree with it. I just thought this book was so enlightening and so different from anything that I've ever read. I love reading from different perspectives and from characters that are nothing like me, so I love this book. Yeah, that was The Transition Baby that I highly recommend. I mean, obviously I highly recommend it. This is a favorites video. Just assume that I recommend all of the books that I'm talking about. Then completely different, I read Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice this year for the first time. I'd watched both adaptations. I watched the movie when I was really young, and I watched the TV show adaptation this year, which, by the way, I highly recommend. I think it's a great adaptation. It's so good, so good. But we're not here to talk about that, we're here to talk about the book. Because I had watched the movie when I was really young, I knew vaguely about the story, but honestly I was so young that I barely remembered anything from it at all. If you don't know what Interview with the Vampire is about, it's about this man named Louis, who is a plantation owner. And so one night he meets the vampire Lestat, who turns him into a vampire. And so he begins his journey as a vampire, accompanied, I don't know how to say that word, with Lestat, his creator. And so the whole book is basically Louis telling his story in an interview with this one human man about his life as a vampire and all of his struggles with being a vampire, all of his moral and philosophical and religious dilemma at being a vampire. And actually for a vampire story, it was surprisingly uneventful. This book is really much more of a character study on Louis. It's mostly about his struggles with being a vampire and all of his philosophical questioning on where vampires come from, what does it mean for religion, because he is a religious man, he's a Christian or Catholic man, and so he believes in God, and he thinks, are vampires a creation of God? Are they from Satan? What is going on? And he doesn't have answers, and obviously for someone it is very frustrating to not have answers, especially since he expected answers from Lestat because he's an older vampire than him and he's his creator, and also because Lestat kind of hints all the time that he has more info when he never tells him any of it, so you actually don't know if he does have more info or if he actually doesn't know more than Louis and he just hints at having more than he actually does because he doesn't want Louis to leave him. His relationship with Lestat is definitely interesting and quite funny at times. There are some funny moments because Lestat is actually kind of a funny character. Let me just say that. You understand why Louis doesn't like him much, but I did find him very entertaining, and even if he was annoying me sometimes, I have to say the part in the book where he leaves the story was, you felt it. You felt that Lestat was not there anymore to give this story this kind of entertaining aspect. It got a lot less entertaining without Lestat, I have to say, but I still really enjoyed it. I really loved Anne Rice's writing and the atmosphere. I thought it was a very atmospheric writing. Even if it doesn't make necessarily for the most exciting novel, eventful novel, I really loved being so deep into Louis' mind. I just love in general character studies and being deep into characters' mind, and I really enjoyed being in Louis' mind, even if it's not the most happy place because he's obviously very depressed. It's also very interesting to see the birth of the vampire as a protagonist who hates his condition as a vampire rather than an antagonist. If you think about it, Twilight could have never existed without Interview with a Vampire, because this was really the blueprint for the depressed vampire. So really, I think we need to thank Anne Rice for the gift that she gave us. But yes, I really enjoyed the first book, and I'm excited to read the second book because I know that it's gonna be from Lestat's perspective and it's completely different from what I've heard. So I'm very interested. I'm very excited for that. Paran by Susan Clarke is kind of an eerie, fantastical book about this man called Paran who lives in what he calls the house, which seems to be kind of a Greek monument type thing with a lot of statues and endless hallways and corridors, and there's the sea, and Piranesi spends all of his days mapping out the place. The only other person besides him in this place is someone that he calls the Other, that visits him sometimes to ask him questions for his research about some great knowledge that we don't really understand much of. The writing style is also very atmospheric, but in a different way. Here it feels definitely eerie. It almost feels like a Greek poem in a way. It's very lyrical. It's very beautiful. And the main thing that I love about this book is that similarly to Interview with the Vampire, but also completely differently, we are very deep into Piranesi's point of view and his mind and his mindset, but he's completely different from Louis in the sense that he's a very innocent and clueless and almost childlike person. So being from his point of view, you're kind of lost as to where he is and what he's doing and what all of this means. What I loved most about this book is that I feel like usually when in a book like that, where you start off, you don't really understand what's going on, usually you start understanding things at the same time as the main character that you're following. But here, because Piranesi is such a clueless and childlike type of character, you actually start to understand things before he does. We start to get horrified at understanding what everything means, and I really love that because it makes it feel that much more heartbreaking. I'm not really sure how to explain, but I feel like there's something so beautiful and almost tragic at being from the point of view of someone as innocent and as kind as Piranesi, because he really feels like a childlike figure who is so innocent from all the wrongs in the world and all of the cruelty of people around him. But it's so satisfying because I feel like this is kind of a mystery book in a way, and the mystery is so satisfying to unravel and so well crafted. But also while reading it, you understand that it's mostly a story about loneliness and what solitude does to the mind of someone, and it's just really beautiful. And another weird book that I loved, where you don't understand anything that's going on for the most of it, is Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyashchenko. This is a fantasy book where we follow this young woman named Sasha who is on a holiday with her mom. There she meets this strange man who asks her to perform some strange tasks, and every time she completes one of these tasks, she throws up a gold coin. At the end of the summer, she is enrolled into this weird magical academy where she doesn't understand, where none of the characters understand what they're doing, what they're studying for, and anytime that they fail, their family gets punished. This was probably the weirdest book that I've ever read because you really do not understand anything that is going on for like a good 75% of it. Yeah, but you really have to stick through it because similarly to Piranesi, the reveal is so interesting and so not what I was expecting. It was so, I don't know, it was so good. I thought it was such a clever twist on the typical magical school trope. It's such a good subversion of it. Actually, I saw someone on Goodreads describe this book as if Harry Potter was written by Kafka, and while I've never read Kafka, I feel like I understand what she meant, and I agree, it definitely feels like that. It's so fascinating. It is definitely completely different from any book that I've ever read, and honestly, that was the most refreshing part about this book, because I feel like in an industry that tends to put out the same type of books over and over again, because I understand, it's an industry, it has to make money, so obviously the things that are popular are gonna, they're gonna be put out. I understand that, but I love to see things that are imaginative and innovative and different also be put out. It's such a breath of fresh air. It's so clever, but also so confusing, and I will say, you definitely need to not mind being confused for most of the book if you want to read this book. It's such an interesting book. I feel like if there's something that this book is not, it's predictable. So if you're tired of predictable fantasy books, definitely read this. My next favorite is actually multiple books. It's a whole trilogy, in fact, and it is, I almost dropped the other book. It's the Hunger Games trilogy by Susan Collins, without any surprise at all. I made a whole reading vlog about this trilogy if you want to watch it. I actually read it for the first time this year. I feel like this guy on TikTok, the party's done but it's still here. That's me, because I feel like I'm the last person on earth to have read this book, but it was very good. I have to admit it. Sometimes things are popular for a reason. I'm not gonna bother explaining the plot of Hunger Games. I feel like I said, I'm the last person to have read it, so you probably already know what the plot is. I put the whole trilogy as my favorite because my favorite thing about this trilogy is how seamless the transition from the narrative being about the games to being about the rebellion and the war is. I really love that. I really love how it's clear that Susan Collins had a very clear idea in mind of what she wanted the story to be and what she wanted the message to be. Is also why I think The Hunger Games is probably the best in its genre in terms of YA dystopian. I feel like a lot of other YA dystopians try to recreate The Hunger Games but didn't actually understand the essence of it and why it's good. Because it's not just about this dystopian world where they have children kill each other, it's actually deeper than that. Honestly, especially for YA series, this is the proof that just because it's YA, that doesn't mean that it has to be watered down or less good. You can write YA books that are still very good and very challenging, and that doesn't dumb it down for its readers, and I really appreciate that about this trilogy. I feel like I don't really need to talk much about this book because I don't think I need to convince anyone to read The Hunger Games. Everyone knows it's good, everyone has probably read it, so I just wanted to mention it. My most read author I found out through doing my Storygraph wrap-up thing. It was actually Stephen King. I read like 8 books from him in the year, which is definitely a lot. I didn't realize I read that much from him, but yes, I read a lot of Stephen King. And this year I found actually my favorite Stephen King, and it's The Shining. Again, there is a reason why some things are popular, because it's good. I'm actually surprised that so many people seem to think that the movie is better than the book, because actually the reason why it took me so long to read this book is because I watched the movie when I was a teenager, and I thought it was fine, but I was kind of disappointed by it because I expected it to be, I don't know, better, I guess. I mean, it's a very good movie, but it's not my favorite horror movie, so I was kind of disappointed by it. And since everyone was saying that the movie was so much better than the book, I thought, well, if I already think the movie is mid, I'm probably gonna feel the same way about the book, and not at all. Not at all. It's so much better. My favorite thing in media is characters, and I feel like something that is done so much better in the book than in the movie is the characters. I feel like the movie really watered down all of the characters, but especially the main one, Jack Torrance, because the whole point of his character and the whole point of the story really is that he's a struggling man. And so when you make him a villain from the very beginning in the movie, you kind of lose everything that makes his character interesting. Because the thing about Jack is that we understand that he's someone who's struggling, who is an alcoholic, but he is actually trying to be a better person. He's actually trying to be a better person, and he actually feels shame over what he did, and that's actually the whole point of the haunted hotel thing. The hotel feels his struggle and is using it against him and to turn him mad, basically, and that's the whole point of the story. And so when you change it in the movie, you kind of lose the whole essence of the story and what makes it interesting, and that is why I think the book is so much better, because it's really more about the characters than it is about the hotel. Yes, it's my favorite Stephen King. I think if you need to read a Stephen King, it should be this one, or it should also be Pet Sematary, one of those two. But yes, I like this a little bit better than Pet Sematary. It was really good. The only classic that I have on this list is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This was my first Virginia Woolf ever. Definitely won't be my last. I actually read this book because of Emmy and Caroline here on BookTube. You probably know about them. They have this book club called Game of Tomes, where they read a classic. They read classics every month, and I didn't read every one of their picks, but I did read this one because I wanted to read a Virginia Woolf, and I figured this was the best opportunity, and I did, and I'm so glad I did. It is described as the longest and most charming love letter in literature because we follow this man named Orlando, who was modeled after Virginia Woolf's friend and also lover called Vita Sackville West. And so Orlando starts off as a young nobleman in Elizabethan era, and we follow him as he one day wakes up as a woman in the 18th century. We will follow him basically through time and through his life. In a lot of ways, this book was really ahead of its time in terms of its talk of gender identity and the treatment of women, the fact that the main character is a man who wakes up as a woman and has to grapple with the way that society treats him as a woman while he was used to the advantages that being a man comes with, was definitely very interesting. Especially with Orlando being a writer, I feel like it's very much a commentary on the limitations that are attributed to women writers, that were attributed to women writers at the time. Virginia Woolf probably took from her own experience writing this character. Obviously, as she was a writer, she knew about the limitations that women writers faced at the time, so she obviously took inspiration from that. Also, the fact that he's a writer, I feel like this is very much a love letter to writing. There is so much about the creative process. We see a lot of Orlando writing and taking inspiration to write his stories. I think my favorite aspect of this book was really the writing. I thought the writing was so beautiful. There are so many quotes that I picked on. I wanted to highlight the entire book because of how beautiful every sentence was. That's how much I love the writing. Honestly, I feel like this is some of the best writing that I've ever read. I'm in love with this book. It definitely deserved to be my one classic in this list. And now we are finally onto my top 3 favorite books of the year. So in third position was Bunny by Mona Wad. It's definitely a weird book. It's basically if Mean Girls was a horror movie. If that sounds appealing to you, definitely give it a shot. Mean Girls being one of my favorite movies and me loving horror, obviously this was basically a match made in heaven. I had to love it, and I did. I did really like it. So in Bunny, we follow this girl named Samantha, who is a young writer at university, and in this writing class, she has this group of girls who call each other the Bunnies. And they have this club called the Smut Salon, and Samantha doesn't like them very much. They kind of give off Mean Girls vibes. But one day they invite Samantha to one of their Smut Salon session, and weird things happen. I'm not gonna say much about this book because I feel like this is a book that you really need to experience. And weird things happen in this smut salon, and Samantha starts to be sucked into the bunnies world, into their weird little culty clique, and just a lot of things happen. And it was so weird. It was so eerie and kind of fairy tale like, kind of similar to Vita Nostra. You don't really understand what's going on for most of the book, but contrary to Vita Nostra, you don't get much answers, I will say. But I feel like that's kind of the appeal of the book, is that because Samantha is a writer, and it's said from the very beginning that she has a very vivid imagination, and that she's also kind of a liar, kind of a storyteller. You can't really trust her recollection of events. She's kind of an unreliable narrator, and I feel like that is most of the appeal of this book, is that you spend the entire book from this perspective of this woman who not only we're told she's a liar, but she also doesn't seem to be very mentally sound. So you kind of spend the entire book thinking, what is real, what is not? Can we really trust a version of things? I also love the atmosphere of it. I think Mona Wad really excels at atmospheric writing. That was also my favorite thing in Rouge, that actually was kind of disappointed by it. I didn't like as much, but it's the same kind of fairy tale feeling, very eerie. I don't know how else to explain her writing than to say it feels like you're walking in a dream. Like you're walking in a dreamlike state. You don't really know what's going on, what's happening. I felt so lost for all of the book, and apparently when you see some of my other favorites, that seems to be something that I liked, and that was my favorite thing about Bunny. And also something that I loved about Bunny is how funny it was. I know that not everyone thinks it's funny, but I genuinely thought Bunny was really funny. I don't know, personally I found it really funny, and even though Samantha is not the most likable character, this is also something that I have to warn you about. If you don't like reading from an unlikable main character, you will not like this book, because none of the characters are really likable, to be honest, and Samantha is definitely not likable, but I still really enjoyed reading from her perspective. I still really enjoyed following her journey, and I still felt bad for her. Also, completely unrelated and inconsequential, but I really wanted the bright pink cover. But every time I would go into my bookstore, they only had the bright orange one, and after weeks I was like, okay, whatever, like I really want to read this book, so I'll just buy the orange cover, whatever, it's fine. The next week I go to my bookstore they had the bright pink cover. Again, it's stupid, it's inconsequential, but it really, it really fucking annoyed me. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Anyways, I mean, I still like the bright orange, but the bright pink was so cute. I was so annoyed. It really doesn't matter, but I just wanted to vent about it because it annoyed me. And so, my second favorite book of the year was These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerver. I'm not really sure to pronounce his name, I'm sorry. This book is honestly kind of my perfect book in terms of its subject matter, in terms of the relationship dynamics. It's just exactly what I'm looking for, and I want more books like this. But basically what this book is, this is a dark academia book about the relationship between these two young teenagers named Paul and Julian. Paul is this type of troubled teen. He's really not dealing well with the recent death of his dad. He's kind of violent and he's very shy and sensitive and just, he's kind of your typical, I feel bad for saying that, but he kind of feels like your typical school shooter type of guy. I mean, he's very shy and socially awkward, but he also kind of has this superiority complex, where he thinks that he's smarter than everyone else, but at the same time, he's obviously deeply, deeply insecure. And then you have kind of his opposite, who is Julian, who is very charismatic, very charming, he's very wealthy, very confident, also incredibly smart, and they immediately hit it off, and they form this quick friendship that develop into something more and quickly turn sour and become the whole mess. Very toxic and obsessive. I adore this book. I adore this book. The main thing that I will say I adored about this book is the writing style. When I finished this book, I loved the writing style so much that I immediately went on Goodreads to see if he had written anything else, and I was very sad to see that he hasn't yet, but I will definitely check out anything else that he writes because I love this writing style so much. I loved everything about this book. I say this is my perfect book because this is the type of relationship dynamic that I was looking for so long. I just love these types of very codependent relationships who feel almost visceral in a way, where the characters love each other so much that it feels like if they could live in each other's skin, they would. That's why I say it feels almost visceral, because their relationship is pretty much a car crash waiting to happen. You know that it's headed nowhere good, but you still can't take your eyes off of it. There's something so fascinating about it. Because the thing about their relationship is that I feel like Paul and Julian are both characters that are obviously both deeply troubled and have a lot of struggles in their life, and they kind of take solace into each other, and to the point of codependency, and they feel like it's us against the world. And I feel like they also recognize something into each other, where they feel like this is the only person that can understand me because they are just as bad as I am, so I can show them the darkest part of my soul and they will not judge me for it because they're just as bad as I am. I feel like this is definitely the vibe of their relationship in this book. I love it. I actually would have liked it to be even darker. That's nitpicky because I still loved it, but if as a fan of horror, if it pushed it even a little more and was even more dark, I feel like I would have loved it even more because I love the vibe of it. And by the way, if anyone has read this book and has any recommendation for something similar to this in terms of character relationships and also in terms of just atmosphere and vibe and themes in general, I would gladly take it because I want more books like this. I love this book. I really do. I hate the cover though. That cover, I hate people like this on the cover, and also I feel like it doesn't really match the vibe of the book. I'm sorry whoever designed the cover, but yeah, I don't really like it. Sorry. And finally, my favorite book of the year. It is so dark. I'm so sorry. There is no lights left. But my favorite book of the year was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Wong. What a gorgeous book. Like its name, it is definitely gorgeous. So this book is described as a letter from a son to his mother who cannot read. In this, we follow this character named Little Dog, who is Vietnamese American, and we basically follow his life with his family, mostly his mom and his grandmother. We also learn about their life and specifically the mom while she was in Vietnam, and when she came to America, and you know, all of the trauma that it entails with the Vietnamese War, with being an immigrant in America, starting from zero, having nothing. And while we follow Little Dog all throughout his life, I feel like it is about his life in general, but it is mostly about his relationship with his mother. And this is why I love this book as much as I did, because his relationship with his mother is so painfully real and raw and vulnerable and human. It was so beautiful and heartbreaking to read. It captures so well the relationship, the complicated relationship that you have with a parent who is trying their best, but ultimately who has their own trauma and their own difficulties in life and kind of passes them on to you without wanting to. And it's really about generational trauma. It's also mostly about life in general and love. It felt so raw and vulnerable, and that is also why I thought at first that this book was a memoir and was real, because it felt like Little Dog was a real person. It felt like I was really following someone's life. It felt so realistic. If I had to describe this book in just one word, I would say human. I feel like this perfectly captures what it means to be a person, what it means to be human, and the relationship that connects us all to each other, and just the relationship that you have with your family, the relationship that you have, the romantic relationships that you have, the friendships, everything. I also loved how the structure of this book was in service of the story, because it's told in a very fragmented way. We basically see his life through vignettes of his life that are kind of disconnected from each other. It's not linear narratively, but I felt like it mimicked how life is so well, because you have a juxtaposition of happy moments with terrible moments, with tragedies and happiness and love, and it was just all a mishmash of everything that you experience in life, and also with absolute gorgeous writing, because Ocean Vuong is a poet and you can definitely feel it. This is my favorite writing. It's just so poetic and beautiful, and I'm someone who really appreciates good writing. I love everything about this book. If you have to read any book on this list, please make it this book. Please read this book. If you don't like it though, don't tell me. I don't want to know, because this book is perfect to me and I don't want anything to taint it. But yes, On Earth Through Briefly Gorgeous, it is. It is truly a gorgeous book, and I could not recommend it enough. And with that, this is the end of this video. These were all my favorite books of 2023. Hopefully I will have as many favorite books in 2024. I hope that I will find a lot of new favorites, and please tell me in the comments what were your favorites from 2023, because I love knowing what people read. So yes, that's it for this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.